In today's video tutorial, we're going to have a look at recording palettes. So we're going to be using our groups and palettes workspace. So again, we have nice easy access to our groups. And in this tutorial, we're going to use our 3 quick palette windows. So up here we have our colour window. Now this will store all of the colour attributes of your fixture. So colour mix, colour wheels, CTO wheels, etc, etc. But it will only store colour information. Down here we have our position window. This will store all of your pan and tilt attributes, but again it will only store position information. Over here we have our go burn beams window. This will store all of your other attributes, so things like intensity palettes, strobe palettes, gobo palettes, zoom palettes, but it will not store any colour information or any pan and tilt information. So when you set your palette up, make sure that you're putting the information into the correct window. Okay, so we're going to start with colours. Now in the rig that we're using here in our visualizer, we currently have some spots and some washes that can both mix colour. So it's a nice idea to store all of your lights that can do colour together in the same palette. Okay, and then you're not worrying about which red palette does your spots, which red palette does your washes, etc. Okay, now we can use our attribute bank to mix the colour. Here I can see my red, green and blue mix. Now my washes mix by red, green and blue, but my spots mix by CMY. So an easier way to create the colour palettes is to use your attribute editor. Okay, this will be available as a workspace, and if not, you can find it under the option Open Workspace window. Okay, and here we have a colour mix, so this will allow me to really easily mix colour straight away across those different types of fixtures. Then all I need to do is, once I've set the information up on the lights, is drop it into an empty window under my colours window. Now if you don't legend it up, the console will give you an auto legend, so it will give you a squiggle of the correct colour. Okay, so colours are very easy. I can just keep picking out the colours I want on my fixtures, and I can keep dropping them in to my colour window. There we go. Okay, now what we'll see displayed in the palette is the attributes that they contain will be highlighted. So these all have C highlighted, indicating that they have colour information in them. And in the top corner, those should have a little S, indicating that these are shared palettes. So if we view one of our shared palettes, we can see that it saved a value for 1 mmx spot and 1 600 LED wash. So what the palette will now do is, as long as the fixture type was stored inside it, it will now share that information to any fixture of the same type. So you just need to make sure that you're setting up your shared palettes with at least one of each fixture you want to be saved within that palette. Okay, we're going to have a look at position now. So if I take my back spots and I'm going to tilt them straight out to the audience. Okay, again the console will be able to see that these 4 mmx spots have identical pan and tilt information across them, which means when I store the palette this time, it's still going to save it as a shared palette. So it will store one value for the mmx spot, and when I apply that palette, it will just share that value out to any mmx spot. Okay, if I take those back spots again, this time what I'm going to do is change the information across them. Okay, so we can create a nice span, and now the lights will have different pan and tilt information on them. So when I store the palette now, you'll see there's a small N in the top corner. This stands for a normal palette, and this means the console has had to save individual fixture information. So when we view this one, we can see that each one of those 4 spots I used to create it has its own information stored inside the palette. That means that when I select all of my spots, they can all use the shared palette to tilt out to the audience, but only the 4 I used to create the fan have information inside that palette to move. Your gobo and beam window will store everything else. So for example, all of our MMX spots will have identical gobo wheels. So again, we can just use one and make all of our gobo palettes shared. You can either use your attribute bank to put your attributes onto your encoder wheels, or you can still use your attribute editor and see all of the information in front of you. Again, as you start to pick out information, you can just then drop it into the correct window and save that palette. What's good about your attribute editor window is that you can also deselect information. So if I want to make a gobo spin palette, I need to put a gobo inside the fixtures to see how fast or slow my spin is going. So any blue value will get stored into the palette. I don't really want to save it with the gobo information because I want to be able to then use the spin palette over any gobo. So what I can do is hit the blue value again and it will become greyed out, and this means that that will not get stored when I record the palette. So now it's just saved those blue spin values and I can use it over any gobo I like. Now when you set a legend for a palette, you have different options. You obviously have your keyboard, so you can write in a text legend. The next tab along is a pencil. In here you can sketch your own legend, so you have a colour picker here, a pencil thickness here, so I can start to sketch in a gobo rather than trying to explain in words what it looks like. The Mona Lisa tab is a library of inbuilt images you can use. So there's things like gobo images, directional images for palettes, group images. The tab at the end is a folder, and this will allow you to also import any images you want to use as well. So you can select how you want to legend it. When you hit enter, that will give you a nice user-friendly legend on your palettes.